Appreciate every single one of you for being here. If you wouldn't mind taking a seat, we're going to get to our next panel. Of course, you're welcome to go back out into the main area to network if you'd like to keep talking, but we have a phenomenal panel on DAOs coming up for you right now. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Alexi Cortez, the Community Product Manager at DotErth, Chase Mayeux, Head of Operations at Coral DeFi, and of course, Sam Padilla from ATXDAO. Let's hear it for him.
Thank you.
Enjoy, guys.
Thanks.
All right. Oh, God.
Hey, everybody. Good morning.
I already did.
Good morning, GM.
Howdy.
So everyone, I'm Alexi Cortez. I am kind of in a mix of roles because I work at a startup, so I'm technically a product manager, but realistically doing all of the growth. And I have a very controversial opinion on DAOs, which is why I'm very excited to moderate. But before we jump in, I'll let Sam and Chase give introductions, and please mention your involvement with DAOs.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, everybody. I'm Chase Mayeux. I am the head of operations for Coral DeFi. I'm an Air Force brat that moved every 2 years all over the US, born in Germany. My middle name's Austin. Little brother's first name is Houston, so it was kind of written in the stars to finally make it to here. I'm on the advisory board of DecentDAO. I created DinnerDAO here in Austin. We started at McDonald's and kept trying to work our way up to better spots. I became really interested in DAOs through the writing of Dao De Chen. It was later expanded upon by Dow Jones in 1882 and popularized by System of a Down pretty recently. So,
good intro. It's going to be hard to beat. Hey everyone, my name is Sam. My day job, I'm actually representing, which it's interesting. I do crypto at Google Cloud for my day job, and my night job is ATXDAO. So I'm one of the core contributors to ATXDAO, we're a DAO dedicated to Austin and trying to make Austin the crypto capital of the world. And aside of these two things, I also do a lot of ad hoc kind of like advising and consulting for some other companies, and I write about DAOs and philosophy and all that stuff. So kind of excited to share a little bit more about the things that I've learned in the space and talk about the big ideas that I have at least around DAOs and governance.
Thank you. All right, so first question I have is, I've met some people that are major evangelists of DAOs. They think DAOs are going to completely change the future and are super innovative. And I personally don't quite see that just yet, but again, I'm not involved in a DAO, so maybe I'm missing something. But to me, they resemble a company with voting rights or social clubs like Soho House. So I'm curious what your take is on what innovation and how much progress a DAO can contribute versus existing models.
So I think DAOs are really exciting because when I left college, I was pretty determined to start a company. And so you go through all the steps of forming an LLC. And that can be kind of a barrier of entry to a lot of people. Then you have the ability to, as people were unifying in things that they were all commonly interested in on Reddit, a lot of people have explained DAOs as a Reddit with a bank account, which I think is kind of cool and a little bit accurate. So instead of people having to go and figure out how to start a company, there's all these DAOs created, whether they're social DAOs, investment DAOs, or product DAOs, but something that everyone's interested in, where they can essentially go and it's fully automated and they can onboard themselves and essentially start or be a part of a company very seamlessly without having to go through the LLC registration, EINs plugged into a bank account, all the other additional tax burdens that go with that as well. So I think it's kind of cool that you can very easily go and become a part of something that's interesting to you.
So I would say that I think there's a really big common misconception around the point of DAOs. I think a lot of people see DAOs as just another business organization or as a co-op or as a group, or they try to label DAOs as traditional companies. And a lot of people think that kind of the end game of DAOs is, oh, DAOs are the future of companies, or DAOs are maybe the future of nonprofits, or DAOs are maybe the future of investment clubs or whatever. But I think people miss the point that the true end game of DAOs is not necessarily any of the previous things mentioned or any of the existing business organizations. I believe that the end game of DAOs is decentralized nation building. And as a consequence, DAOs are not so much about running a business as it is creating a new government. And as a consequence, the beauty of DAOs lies not necessarily on the things that you do as a DAO, but on the governance innovations that come from the organizations. So that would be my first argument is I think DAOs bring a lot of innovation in governance that we frankly haven't seen in hundreds of years. And that's what really excites me about the space and about DAOs.
Nice, thank you. So my second question, or maybe third question, I'm losing track, but a DAO to me means that everyone has a voice, everyone has a vote, but if voting is token gated and based on token ownership, how do you prevent either one person or a small subset of people from owning all of the influence?
That's a good question, and that often happens where you'll have a project or a DAO, and you have a whale that comes up and scoops up the ownership. I think that is often, the result of it's kind of what the free capital market is all about. If you have something of value, then it draws in people that want to invest in this, and the value of those tokens grow. So then you have people kind of fighting for ownership of their tokens and involvement with the DAO. So where that could be an issue, it's also kind of a double-edged sword, I believe, and it's also kind of something good where people fight to have majority ownership of this DAO or protocol or project. And at the same time, there's different mechanisms that can be built in to where, maybe it's not strictly based on acquiring the governance tokens by buying them, but through participation and pulling your weight within the DAO and taking on different bounties and jobs that you do to get kind of more of a say in what the decisions are made in the DAO.
I don't think there's kind of a one solution fits all for DAOs. As you were saying, there's a lot of mechanisms. There's, of course, quadratic voting, in which the weight of your vote reduces quadratically based on the tokens that you have. So the more tokens you have, you only get half more votes as opposed to proportionally. There's, of course, NFT voting, which is actually what we have with ATXI, in which you are a member, you have the same vote, so there's no more voting rights than any other people. You could even limit the NFTs that a given wallet can hold. So there's a lot of solutions that DAOs have been experimenting with, and that's kind of part of the beauty, right, of what I mentioned of governance innovation. But I think the thing that I would like to point out is that even in cases in which a malicious actor comes and buys most of the voting power or plays the game, games the system in a way that they are able to concentrate most of the voting power, at the end of the day, governance structures are always superseded by social consensus, meaning that, and I guess it's easy to give an example to explain what I mean. So I don't know if anyone here is involved with Cosmos, but around March earlier this year, one of the biggest chains in Cosmos called Juno, they had an airdrop last year, and somebody gamed the system in Juno such that they were able to concentrate 30% of the voting power based on gaming the airdrop system. And that was a huge risk for the entire community because it had a huge voting power in the entire decision-making of the DAO and also validation of the chain and so on. So they passed a proposal in which they literally said, you know what, those tokens are not yours, we're gonna take them away. And that was a huge deal back in March or February of this year when that happened, because that was one of the first times, one of the first times since the DAO hack of Ethereum in which the community basically said, you know what, we're gonna erase the canon historical situation or the historical state or we're gonna reshape the historical state that the blockchain is keeping track of. And some people were enraged, some people voted against it. It was a huge political issue. But that just goes to show that at the end of the day, the same way that this happened with Juno or the same way that it happened with Ethereum during the DAO hack, social consensus always supersedes the governance system. So if it happens to be that somebody comes in a malicious way, completely buys out the DAO, the people that organize the DAO could just create a new one, exit, change the consensus if they all agree to do so, right? So that's also, I guess, one of the bigger beauties of crypto is the right to fork. the right to leave, the right to exit, the same way that Ethereum had the right to exit when the DAO hack happened, and or Juno's right to exit when the airdrop gaming happened. So social consensus kind of always supersedes what is agreed upon in the governance. And I guess that's part of the beauty is like if the community still wants to do something good, they can agree to continue to do that good regardless of the attacks, I guess.
So in that same vein, and I'm skipping ahead, but social consensus is an interesting one because everyone has different levels of likability, of influence. Some people may just not have any charisma, and that's going to impact how people vote and how people influence others within the organization or within the DAO. How do you think that plays a part in voting and in just generally how that impacts DAOs?
Well, I guess there's two ways where you can make decisions. There's concave decision making and convex decision making, which is kind of expanded upon really well by Vitalik in some of his latest writings. In some instances, it's better to have a consensus of people making decisions. Let's say concave decision making, where you have option A and option B, and plotted on a chart, it makes an arc like that, and you can decide whether to allocate funds to project A, project B, and maybe in that instance it wouldn't be as good to dedicate a token specifically to one project, but instead diversify your bet and help both projects with a better likelihood of one of them succeeding. So that is a decision made on a concave chart, and it's better to get that consensus. And then you've got convex decision making, where you have decision A, let's say a military perspective, and you want to attack a target here with your forces, or there's another target here, and you can choose one or the other, or you can do both and divide your troops. And in that instance, you divide the troops. It's a convex decision, and in that instance, it's not as favorable of a decision to do both and reach a consensus. So. In that case, DAOs really aren't suitable for every single, everything you want to do. You don't need to DAOify everything. Sometimes you need subjective leadership to step up and make decisions. So in that case, it's not really a one-size-fits-all in my mind.
I think that's just kind of a challenge of humans more so than they're about DAOs. I think it's present everywhere. If you go to an interview and you never smile, and you do a next interview and you smile all the time, I would be willing to bet that it's just like humans are biased, they're social creatures, and at the end of the day, if you're charismatic, it's easier to do things that involve other humans. And I guess this also points to kind of a deeper issue with DAOs, or even crypto as a whole. A lot of people try to eliminate the human element in crypto, or they say crypto is about trust elimination, and I don't necessarily agree. I think you can't get rid of the human aspect of it, because at the end, crypto is just trying to give us a tool or a technology or a base layer to build a new societal structure on top of, and society at the end of the day is made of humans, right? So it's not so much about completely removing the human of the equation or completely removing trust from the equation, but about minimizing it. So what are some of the processes, the governance processes that you can build so that you can minimize the trust they have in specific humans, or minimize the impact of charisma in the decision making or in the voting power or whatever. But at the end of the day, I think DAOs and crypto as a whole are still about humans, and humans are social creatures, and that's something that we need to be aware of as we think through the governance systems of DAOs and we think about DAOs in general, or crypto in general. Humans are part of the equation, and this is an issue about humans.
Totally. So the next question's about information and voter participation. Maybe I'm admitting too much, but I'm never a well-informed voter, and I think that that's a big flaw of mine. But it's really hard to be a well-informed voter, especially going to vote in Austin, and there's just so many things that I should be read up on that I'm not. And then voting participation is also really hard. So given that a DAO is structured around mostly voter participation and everyone being well-educated and well-informed and holding people accountable, how do you think that plays a role into voting with DAOs?
Well, I think just to start, it's important that you join something that you're actively passionate about, whether it's a product you want to create, an investment you have a good thesis on, or a social cause that you feel really passionately about. And if that's the case, then you don't have to try to force everyone to participate and vote, but instead it's much easier to be kind of a shepherd of doing it on your own. And if not, those members can often leave, or they can be maybe incentivized. But at the end of the day, these are very social things where you just you join it because you love it. And if that's the case, then participation should relatively be high.
I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done in voting delegation. Voting delegation, not necessarily like validation delegation or staking, traditionally speaking, but voting delegation. Because, so like you vote in Texas, or let's say you vote in the US, or you have the right to vote in the US, not by choice. You didn't choose to opt into the United States voting system. You were just born here, hence you have the rights to vote, right? So I don't think it's so much about like caring necessarily about what you're involved, but and one could argue that if you even joined the DAO to begin with, there's some level of interest into whatever this DAO is doing, and there's going to be different levels of engagement. Like people are probably part of like, if you consider to be a part of a DAO to just hold a token, and then that token or the token holders of that specific organization kind of created a DAO, then people who are actively engaged in Web3 are part of like, I don't know, 10 DAOs or something. I'll be curious to see kind of the averages here. But like there's a lot, right? So it's hard to keep up with everything that's going on. And as a consequence, one of the biggest issues that most DAOs face, as you probably know, is voter participation and voting engagement. There's probably like 15 or 10%. I remember reading the number that is usually 15 to 10% of token holders actually vote in proposals. But I think one of the biggest issues is because there's not a very strong way to delegate votes. And that's also one of the really cool innovations of DAOs, or one of the really cool things that DAOs enable compared to the traditional American voting system, in which you have voting delegation, in which your votes are stuck with the same person for 2 years, 4 years, depending on the person that you choose, right? So you vote on a president, you're delegating your votes to whatever, or representatives, I guess is a better example. You delegate your votes to this representative, and then the representative goes and represents you for 4 years. And then if at any point in time this representative decides to, or chooses a way that they act, or they start acting in a way that you don't agree with, you're stuck with them for like 2 years. So basically you have a voting delegation period of 2 to 4 years. The cool thing about DAOs that DAOs can enable is, as you start voting on more important things, as DAOs become like countries, and you actually start voting on laws that affect you in a direct way, maybe a DAO passes a proposal to offer healthcare, and you're deciding whether that should be free or not. If you're not informing that issue, then you can basically delegate to somebody that is, and then when the next issue comes up, and the next issue is about technology, and you actually happen to know a lot about technology, then you can vote on your own, you can receive delegations, you can build incentive systems around those delegations. So it's just really exciting to think that, compare what is happening in DAOs and the governance innovations happening in DAOs, and compare that to the traditional voting system, not just in the US, but in any democratic system in the world. And you realize, wow, there's a lot of cool stuff happening here. There's a lot of cool things that you can do, and there's a lot of cool things that you can empower voter participation, encourage voter participation at a small and also at a higher level as well.
And just to add to that, that's kind of the beauty of DAOs, is that you don't need max participation. There's not that chokehold of everything running through one central person. Parker McCurley, CEO of Decent Labs, now Decent DAO, his vision of that is, well, one, he doesn't look at resumes. He has it fully automated. People can onboard themselves. And at the end of the day, you just don't need everything running through Parker. At some point, he ideally is going to be phased out and not, a critical component of that DAO, not needing to participate, ideally.
No, but I think like a DAO, at the end of the day, you do want people to engage with voting. Either, not necessarily the people themselves, but you do want to have the voting power being used for something, because one of the core ideas of a DAO is to be able to distribute ownership and decision-making amongst people, right? So if you don't have, if you have a supply of decision-making power or decision-making tokens, let's just throw the word token out there. If you have supply of decision-making tokens of 100 and only 10 tokens are actually voting, basically you have the DAO being dominated by 10 people. And that's it's not great because like a lot of the people who actually join the DAO and hold the tokens, they actually own part of the DAO and are supposed to own part of the DAO and oftentimes put the money in that is often being used. So no, I definitely think that voter participation is a huge issue and you do want to have people voting, but for that you need to make it easier on people to vote. And right now, like keeping up with Discord is just an absolute nightmare. So very bullish on people working on DAO tooling.
Thank you. So I have a question too about misaligned incentives. I'm curious if you think DAOs are still the right structure when there are misaligned incentives. And for example, I had one friend tell me that it would be awesome if Uber were a DAO because then all the drivers could vote to have higher payouts. But that obviously then penalizes all of the riders because their fees are more expensive. So do you still think that DAOs are the right structure when there are two sides of a business?
Again, I know people get really excited about wanting to DAOify everything because you really can, but it's not one size fits all, and that's an instance where you need I would think, a team to make those executive decisions to see, who that affects. Is it going to be the drivers, the riders, the shareholders? It's not for every single company. So. I don't know if Uber would be the best DAO, but maybe something like it can spring up out of the woodworks that has innovations that we've yet to explore.
Yeah, it's really hard to design incentives. Like humans interacting with each other form in a way a complex system, and in any complex system, when you change a tiny thing in the complex system, you have absolutely no idea how that's going to end up affecting the broader system, right? You can draw some inferences, but it's hard to know. Like we go to Yellowstone and we introduce wolves, and then the rivers change the path that they are actually flowing through because the wolves actually eat the rabbits that were eating some of the plants around the river, and then that's basically making the river shift the path that is flowing through. So that's kind of the hard thing about complex systems. You don't know how inputs are going to end up reflecting on the system as a whole. So I think there's a lot of experimentation going on, but I definitely echo what you were saying, Chase. Like, not everything needs to be a DAO. And there are things that are really hard to do in a purely decentralized way, which I may want to point out, there's also another shortcoming of a lot of people in crypto. A lot of people in crypto think everything needs to be decentralized, and that's not really the case. Like, so I work at Google, right? And Google has like one of the biggest, if not the biggest, don't quote me on this, but one of the biggest like hardware infrastructure in the world. And one of the biggest parts of that infrastructure is underground sea cables. Try to lay an underground sea cable with a DAO. That's going to be madness, right? Because like, it's really freaking hard to do. And there's things by which centralization actually helps. And decentralization in and of itself is not necessarily the end goal. All of these are just tools. Centralization is a tool. Decentralization is a tool. And you're trying to actually achieve a goal. I just think, for instance, that for the goal of rebuilding society, I think a decentralized society and a decentralized foundation is better. But there are things like laying an underground sea cable in which it may not necessarily be the case. Or Uber, right? Uber can be another example.
Thank you. So next question, and then I think we'll wrap up. Truthfully, I think that when people have a sense of ownership to something, they're more likely to tell their friends about it and promote it, and they're more excited about it, even if they don't participate in voting or even if they don't really care about what's going on. So I truthfully think that people like to DAOify things because you get extra word of mouth and extra marketing versus you actually care about decentralized voting. I'm just curious to hear y'all's reaction to that.
Yeah, I think we've seen that to a fault on crypto Twitter, where you're a part of something and you just want to tell everyone whether it's a rug pull or it's actually legitimate. So, I was talking to my buddy Kiefer sitting here, that's going to be going on soon, about I want to start like a treasure hunting club. Now, would that be a good company? I don't know, but maybe every single conference we go to, there's a group of like-minded people that want to go seeking out a treasure of some sort, and the DAO can potentially provide, some structure to that, a treasury, an ability to vote, and it's kind of a tool set that gives you the ability to do something like that much easier, and have a kind of a spot for us all to unify. So, that's one way where a DAO would be beneficial to it, and then of course I'd be able to tell everyone there, and then everyone else would obviously hear about it because we'd be passionate about it.
No, I definitely agree, Alexi, with the issue that a lot of people just use DAOs as a marketing tool and as a way to get like buy-in from people. And I think, to your point, Chase, that has definitely contributed to kind of the memetics of crypto Twitter. But I would like to challenge also the audience and anybody who's eventually listening to this through the podcast. Like, if you're getting involved in crypto, make sure that you do so for the right reasons and you understand why you're doing this, because there's a lot of people in this space. And this is like frustrating for me, how many people in this space are just repeating the same very shallow arguments about alignment of incentives or ownership or Web 1, Web 2, Web 3, or privacy, whatever. Like, and when you actually probe deeper, there's not a lot of substance there. I don't know if you guys have heard of the term the hollow abstraction. I think a lot of people have very convinced ideas on crypto, but they're based on hollow abstractions. And a hollow abstraction is basically you have a conviction that you don't have a foundation for. So I challenge you to make sure that you have this foundation, especially if you're bullish in the space. Like, know why this matters, be able to articulate what this matters, and be able to like talk at a very deep level about why, for some cases, an alignment of incentives will be beneficial, and don't just, because you have some skin in the game, just go around saying, oh, number go up to the moon, bullish, right?
LFG. Okay, so before we wrap up, Sam, last time we met for coffee, you mentioned that ATXDAO is doing a ton of innovation. I just wanted to give you a couple minutes to share about all the cool stuff that you guys are working on.
Yeah, it's okay. So I'll talk about the three things that the vision of it. So I'll talk about what we're working on, and I'll also talk about kind of like my personal vision for what ATXDAO can become. So ATXDAO, as I said at the beginning, is a DAO dedicated to making Austin the crypto capital of the world. And we do that in three main ways, right? So we work a lot with community. So if you know, you know, there's nothing like a crypto, like an ATXDAO party or meetup. So we host some of the best meetups, and we actually connect the community in Austin. The other point is we do a lot of like ecosystem work with business and local artists. So an example, if you've been to Native Hostel on East 4th, there's a huge mural that we helped actually paint, and we turned into an NFT. We raise money for some art projects here in town.
I've got it on my shirt. I love that shirt.
Hell yeah.
Not this one.
Yeah. I was going to look at it. But yeah, so there's a lot of ecosystem work that we do. And there's also a lot of policy work that we're doing as well. So, and that's kind of what I've been the most involved in. We're trying to get DAOs recognized as legal entities in the state of Texas. So I think the previous panel was talking about regulation. And that's something that we're actively working on how do we actually change the LLC statute to be able to encompass DAOs and allow people to incorporate as LLCs in the state of Texas while preserving anonymity, voting rights, and a lot of the things that we care about for DAOs. So that's kind of what we work on. Those are the three main areas. If you want to know more, just ATXDAO.com. But then my big vision for this is, I think, as I said at the beginning, the end game for DAOs for me is decentralization building. And I genuinely think that what we are doing can be a precursor to that. So just imagine a world in which every major city starts to have a similar DAO to ATXDAO, which is dedicated to their own city, a purely grassroots movement. And it comes a point in which it becomes beneficial to be part of that DAO, and it may come a point in which it becomes more beneficial to be part of the DAO than it would be to be part of like your actual jurisdiction. And imagine these DAOs that start connecting. So let's say, for instance, in many years from now, all the local DAOs around the world are able to freely travel amongst each other. So somebody who lives in Indonesia or somebody who lives in Singapore and is part of the Singapore DAO has direct access to Austin. And whenever they come to Austin, they have access to healthcare, or they have access to education, or they have access to protection, or they have access to living. There's a lot of really cool real estate, smart city projects happening here in Austin as well. So a lot of the services that you usually would get from your state could be, in a way, decentralized, privatized, and hosted by DAOs. And it comes a point in which it is objectively better to receive education from a DAO network than it is from your shitty school system in Colombia. So that's kind of my big vision for this, is a bunch of different local DAOs across the world that start to connect with each other and offer objective benefits to being part of the network, and slowly start merging more into this vision of a decentralized network state. So that's what I would like to see at some point happening.
Thank you. And Chase, any last thoughts?
Well, I'm honored to sit next to such a visionary, and Alexi, you're amazing, and just sharing a stage with y'all is incredible. Coral, we're a hedge fund, high yield stablecoin based fund. We're having some trouble tracking all of our positions across all wallets, all traders. So we created it on our own because we could not find this anywhere. So we just launched Simul under Coral Labs, and we're going to be reaching out to a number of hedge funds that need data aggregation, DeFi accounting software the way that we did, and we built it. So if that's of any interest, you can always reach me on Twitter, and then I'm just excited to keep supporting and being a part of ATXDAO where I can.
Thank you. And we are at time, so thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Let's keep it going for these fantastic panelists. We will be back at the 50-minute mark on the hour. If you would mind rejoining us just about then for a talk on interoperability. But for now, feel free to take a bio break and get some water, and we'll see you back in 10. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Cryptocurrent. Cryptocurrent is a cryptocurrency and blockchain education platform that's bridging the gap between the curious newcomers who are just discovering the space and the thought leaders who are shaping its future. All opinions expressed by Richard Carthon, the Cryptocurrent team, and their guests on this show are exclusively their own opinions. This show and any other Cryptocurrent production is exclusively for informational purposes.